Now, today we're going to be pretty much covering the last 4 chapters through 47 to 50, all of which are dealing with the same sort of theme and the same main point. So we're going to be reading and focusing on chapters 49 and 50 today. And I think the best way to deal with chapters 47 and 48 is we're going to actually do a study on those this week in small group. So small group is going to be at our house on Thursday this week. So you're all welcome to come along. 7 p.m. I think at our house. So yeah, come along at 7. We'd love to have you. We'd love to see you. Feel free to invite any friends as well. Yeah, and on that note, actually, there's a barbecue next Saturday at Matt and Emily's house. So we'd love it if you join us for that. Do invite anyone to that barbecue too. So we're going to read chapters 49 and 50 of Genesis. But first, I've got a question to ask you. Do you fear death? Do you fear that dark abyss? This question isn't in my words. I must admit it's actually a quote from Pirates of the Caribbean. That's what Davy Jones says. But I think it's an important question because that's a question that, well, I think is good to ask ourselves, but you may even find you've been asked that question before. I think that probably the predominant view of death in our culture is that we'll be meeting a dark abyss, an eternal embrace of nothingness. And some people find that terrifying. Some people suggest that that's a nice ending to their life because they'll have nothing to worry about. But do you fear death? Do you fear possibly a dark abyss? I think these chapters will help us work through some of that. Let's read together. Genesis chapter 49, verse 1. So just to catch us up briefly, actually, obviously we've just been following the story of Joseph and Jacob and the rest of his sons and Joseph's family have just met him in Egypt. And in chapters 47 and 48, we see finally all the blessings of Joseph through the Egyptians poured out onto not only his brothers and his family, but onto all the nations of the world. And then we see Jacob coming to his deathbed. He adopts and blesses Joseph's 2 sons into the family, giving them blessings. And here on his deathbed, we start to read his blessings for his 12 sons, the 12 tribes of Israel. Verse 1. Then Jacob called his sons and said, "Gather yourselves together that I may tell you what shall happen to you in the days to come. Assemble and listen, O sons of Jacob. Listen to Israel your father. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might and the first fruits of my strength, preeminent in dignity and preeminent in power. Unstable as the water, you shall not have preeminence, because you went up to your father's bed and you defiled it. He went up to my couch. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Weapons of violence are their swords. Let my soul come not into their counsel. O my glory be not joined to their company, for in their anger they killed men, and in their willfulness they hamstrung oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's son shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's cub. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He stoops down. He crouched as a lion and as a lioness. Who dares rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him. And to him shall the obedience, to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. Binding his foal to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He has washed his garments in wine, and his vesture in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, and his teeth are whiter than milk. Zebulun shall dwell at the shore of the sea. He shall become a haven for ships, and his border shall be at Sidon. Issachar is a strong donkey, crouching between the sheepfolds. He saw that a resting place was good, and that the land was pleasant, so he bowed his shoulder to bear, and became a servant at forced labour. Dan shall be a judge of his people. And as one of the tribes of Israel, Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a viper in the path, that bites the horse's heels so that his rider falls backwards. I wait for your salvation, O Lord. Raiders shall raid Gad, but he shall raid at their heels. Asher's food shall be rich, and he shall yield royal delicacies. Naphtali is a doe let loose, that bears beautiful forms. Joseph is a fruitful bough by a spring. His branches run over the wall. The archers bitterly attack him and shoot at him and harass him severely. Yet his bow remained unmoved. His arms were made agile by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. From there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. By the God of your father who will help you, by the Almighty who will bless you, with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that crouches beneath, blessings of the breasts of the womb. The blessings of your father are mighty beyond the blessings of my parents, up to the bounties of the everlasting hills. May they be on the head of Joseph, and on the brow of him who is set apart from his brothers. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf, in the morning devouring prey, and in the evening dividing the spoil. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel. This is what their father said to them as he blessed them, blessing each with the blessing suitable to him. Then he commanded them and said to them, I am to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Hebron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field at Machpelah, to the east of Mamre, in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with a field from Ephron the Hittite to possess as a burying place. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife. And there I buried Leah. The field and the cave that is in it were bought from the Hittites. When Jacob finished commanding his sons, he drew up his feet into the bed and breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. Then Joseph fell on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel. 40 days were required for it. For that is how many are required for embalming. And the Egyptians wept for him 70 days. And when the days of weeping for him were past, Joseph spoke to the house of Pharaoh, saying, If now I have found favour in your eyes, please speak in the ears of Pharaoh, saying, My father made me swear, saying, I am about to die. In my tomb that I have hewn out for myself in the land of Canaan, there you shall bury me. Now therefore, please let me go up and bury my father. Then I will return. And Pharaoh answered, Go up and bury your father, as he has made you swear. So Joseph went up to bury his father. With him went up all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his household, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, as well as all the household of Joseph and his brothers and his father's household. Only their children and flocks and their herds were left in the land of Goshen. And there they went up with him, both chariots and horsemen. It was a very great company. When they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond the Jordan, they lamented there with a very great and grievous lamentation. And he made a mourning for his father 7 days. When the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning on the threshing floor of Atad, they said, This is a grievous mourning by the Egyptians. Therefore the place was named Abel Mizraim, that is, beyond the Jordan. Thus his sons did for him as he commanded them, and his sons carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave at the field at Machpelah, to the east of Mamre, which Abraham bought with the field from Ephron the Hittite to possess as a burying place. After he had buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had gone up with him to bury his father. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, May it be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil we did to him? So they sent a message to Joseph saying, Your father gave his command before he died. Say to Joseph, Please forgive their transgressions of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. And now, please forgive the transgressions of your servants, of the God of your father. Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, Behold, we are your servants. But Joseph said to them, Do not fear, for For am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones." Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. So Joseph remained in Egypt as his father's house. Joseph lived 110 years, and Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the third generation. The children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were counted as Joseph's own. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am about to die, but God will visit you and bring you up out of the land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, "God will surely visit you, and you shall carry my bones up from here." So Joseph died, being 110 years old. They embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. What do we think about that? How does that feel? I certainly think that a lot of the previous chapters we've been reading of Joseph's story have been really powerful, really impactful. I really sort of connected with Joseph. I felt his plight and his sorrows, his joy as he was saved by God and raised up again. What a fantastic story Joseph's was. So as we come to these last few chapters, and it's sort of instructions for burial, and some sort of confusing and slightly obscure blessings, is it a bit anticlimactic? Has Genesis kind of fallen a bit flat at the end? Why has it ended on this note? Why not just cut it off after Joseph's amazing story and sort of tie it up there with Joseph's triumph in God? Well, I think we've got to ask ourselves, what is the main theme of Genesis? What is Genesis all about? And take a moment to consider that. What do you think the main theme of Genesis is? What are the lessons we've been coming back to week after week? Things you might have heard repeated? What things have impacted you? What has Genesis been teaching us all the way through? There's been lots of wonderful lessons, right? But I'd propose this. The main theme of Genesis across the whole story is that God keeps his promises. Maybe to expand that slightly, God keeps his promises, and he has promised blessings. So as we're reading these last few chapters of Genesis, we need to keep that in mind. Genesis is all about God's promises and all about how he keeps those promises. I'm going to read very briefly from Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 to 3. And I choose this because I think you could argue that this is the key verse of Genesis. It's certainly one of the key verses. And this is where God makes his covenant with Abraham. And it's the most clearest explanation of God's promises to his people. Now the Lord said to Abraham, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the lands that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse him. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." The whole story, all the chapters to follow, even the chapters before that, have all been about this blessing from God, this promise from God, the covenant that he makes with his people. His promise to bless them. And to summarize it into 4 points for us to deal with today, he's promised them land, the promised land, as we see in verse 1. He's promised them they'll be a great nation. He's promised that he will bless them. And he's promised that all the families of the earth will be blessed through them. Now, as we look again, as we take another look at these blessings of Jacob to his sons, to the 12 tribes of Israel, With a discerning eye, we can see in there, riddled throughout, laced between every verse, these promises of God, and God fulfilling these promises in the blessings, the prophetic blessings of Jacob to the tribes of Israel, to his people. Now, we're going to go through some of them here, but we're not going to deal with every single line, every single verse, every single part of the blessing, because there's so much going on here. First of all, we've got to acknowledge that, okay, this is God's, a prophetic blessing. This is from God to his people, the people of Israel. And these blessings also, therefore, are for us today as well. But we must acknowledge that, first and foremost, they're directly for Jacob's sons. And as Jacob is giving these blessings, this is a deeply personal and difficult blessing that Jacob is handing out. It's blessings sometimes mixed with curses as well, the things that they've done wrong. And it is definitely deeply personal. So we must acknowledge that. And we must also understand that it's full of quirks, and most of it is expressed in very elaborate ancient Hebrew wordplay, which makes it quite difficult to sort of pull apart, quite challenging. There's a lot of play on words. In most of these blessings, they're a play on words of the names of the sons that he's blessing. As he's blessing Joseph, for example, the way he's expressing it for unusual like metaphors is using a play on words of the Hebrew there. He's using alliteration, he's using like metaphors with animals, which was a common way for Hebrews throughout blessings. And so it's a little tricky, but in here, let's have a look. Let's see these blessings. So firstly, God has promised lands to his people, the promised lands. Straight away, as we get down, in fact, let's start with Judah. In verse 11, it says, "He has washed his garments in wine and his vestures in the blood of grapes." Here we have imagery of him owning vineyards and fertile land that's so fertile and so luscious that it's overflowing with wine, so much so that he's washing his garments in it. It's splashing everywhere as he's treading the winepress, and it overflows out and out. It's certain that this blessing would be an understanding of prosperous and fertile lands. And with this blessing being right in the middle of Jacob's instructions for his burial, as we see his gaze firmly fixed on what? The promised lands. Not Egypt, where they're first in the land, where he could have probably a whole pyramid built for him to be buried. No, his eyes are to go back to that cave, in that small field, in the promised land. The first deposit of their inheritance. And so we see here the blessing that they'll be given again, the promised land overflowing with wine, fertile. We see again as we go further down, Zebulun shall dwell on the shore of the sea, verse 13. He shall become a haven for ships. They'll be given land by the sea for fishing, not just the opportunity to have a port, but a port so affluent and so secure that it becomes a haven for all ships. And its border at Sidon, where they'll trade and work with such a prosperous city. We go down again and we see for Issachar. Issachar is a strong donkey crouching between sheepfolds. Again, we have blessings here of lands that will be suitable for pastures. He'll be crouching between sheepfolds in their plural. He saw that a resting place was good and that the land was pleasant. So he bowed his shoulder to bear. The promised land is being again promised here. The land is good, the land is pleasant, and it will bear. As we go further down, we see Asher. Asher's food shall be rich, and he shall yield royal delicacies. Yields there. This is yields that is coming from the blessings of God, so fine that his food will be served to kings, not just in Israel, but across the nations around. Naphtali, Joseph, we see this again and again, these blessings of the promised land. A great nation. Now, great nation. This blessing, as we see in verse 1, Jacob says, "Gather yourselves together that I may tell you what shall happen to you in the days to come." So this is a blessing to his sons. We also see in verse 28, at the end of the blessing, all these are the 12 tribes of Israel. This is what their father said to them as he blessed them. This is a blessing for the 12 tribes, for their descendants as the nation of Israel. And one thing that we might expect from any patriarchal blessing to his sons is that the firstborn receives the lion's share. He receives 2 portions of blessing as the leader of the family, the one who will carry things forward. Yet here, as we read the blessing to Reuben, "Unstable as the water, you shall not have preeminence, because you went up to your father's bed and you defiled it." As we read in previous chapters, Reuben committed adultery with Bilhah, Jacob's concubine, and because of his sin, he is forfeited and he's been disqualified from his preeminence, from his headship of the tribes and his leadership over the nation. What would we expect then? Well, that would be passed surely to the next oldest son. But the next oldest sons, both Simeon and Levi, the next 2, also lose their right to the blessing. Weapons of violence are their swords. Let my soul not come into their counsel, my glory be joined to their company. For in their anger they killed men. Again, this is harking back to their brutal attack on Shechem, where they massacred people. They're disqualified from leadership. And so we see, after the first, second, and third sons, the blessing of the leadership of the tribes of Israel comes down to Judah, the 4th son, who becomes the leader. "Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hands shall be on the neck of your enemies." The hands on the neck of your enemies. He'll be conquering. He will be reigning with an iron fist. He will have military supremacy, and none will challenge his leadership. Verse 9, "Crouched as a lion come up from the prey, a kingly symbol, one of victory." Verse 10, "His scepter shall not depart, a ruler's staff until they bring tribute to him, obedience of the peoples." All of this imagery of leadership, of supremacy, of ruling. In the blessing to Gad in verse 19, "Strong and successful warriors. Raiders shall raid Gad, but he shall raid back at the hills." This is something we see played out in 1 Chronicles 5, 1 Chronicles 12. In the blessings to Joseph, in verse 23 and 24, he'll be bitterly attacked, yet will remain unmoved. In verse 27, "Benjamin is a ravenous wolf." This one seems quite dark, doesn't it? Oh, what's that? He's being blessed as a ravenous wolf. That doesn't seem very sort of very kind and very loving. But in this metaphor here, in this Hebrew play on words, what we see coming through is his fierce and successful warriors, which play out in Judges 3, Judges 5. From the line of Benjamin comes King Saul, the conquering warrior, and his son Jonathan, the most accomplished military leader of all time. God has made Israel a great nation. And to be honest, in all of these things already, in all of these blessings that we've been reading, we see the third blessing, the third promise coming out, that God will bless them. He'll bless them in many ways, with lands, with crops, as he grows their nation and makes them a great nation, a great name, ruling over the lands. And we see his blessings even more clearly promised again to Joseph. "The blessings of your father are mighty beyond the blessings of your parents." Verse 26, "Up to the bounties of the everlasting hills. May they be on the head of Joseph and on the brow of him who is set apart for his brothers." Again, blessings promised. And finally, "All the families of the earth shall be blessed." Well, we've got to read the blessings of Joseph in the context of what he's just been doing in Egypt. His blessings have been an overflow of blessing on the people of Egypt, not only on them, but on all the nations around. And all the nations were fed because of Joseph. And this section itself is right bang in the middle of that being explained in chapter 49 and again in chapter 50. As he goes up to bury his father, we see them mourning for 70 days. We see them doing a 40-day embalmment. We see all the greatest physicians of Egypt. And again, it's reaffirming what what Joseph means to Egypt and the blessing that he's been to them and to all the earth. This is not just obscure blessings in some ancient Hebrew language. It's not just a father airing grievances with his sons on his deathbed and praising those who he likes. This is completely laced all the way through, verse upon verse, with prophetic promises from God on his people. Last year I went on holiday to Wales. We went down to the beach one day. It was pretty hot. And we went into, you were there, Matt, I think it was titled something like, claims to be the oldest or the greatest ice cream parlour in all of Wales, something like that. We went in, it was beautiful. They had like all this old-fashioned style decor and loads of flavours of ice cream, which is great, but I'm quite decisive about my ice cream flavours. If it's a cold day, I'll go for chocolate flavour. If it's a hot day, I'll go for a nice fruity one, a nice refreshing one. So I know what I like. I went in there and I chose the fruity ice cream. I think it was a blueberry one, or blackberry one, sorry. And I went to order it, and as I was asking for it, the server stopped me and said, well, do you not want to try it first? And I thought, well, yeah, why not? Free ice cream, right? So I tried the ice cream. I love it when they give out free tasters. And I had this little tiny spoon, this little throwaway spoon, tasted the ice cream, back in the bin. Now after that, I got the full ice cream. That was the only one I wanted. And it was wonderful. But imagine how scammed you would feel if you took that taster, you tapped your phone to pay, and then you reach out your hand and they go, what are you after? You've had your ice cream. What? Yeah, we gave it you on the spoon. That was it, right? That's what you wanted. No, that was just a taster. That's not the ice cream I was after. What a scam that would be. Because that ice cream is not the main point of what I was paying for, that one little spoon. It was but a foretaste. And you might see where I'm going with this here. These blessings that Jacob is pouring out, yes, are for his sons right there. And yes, they are for the tribes of Israel as they develop and grow out from that moment in time. But these blessings of the promised land, and these blessings of him blessing them in that moment and the nations around him, that's not the main event. That's not the ultimate fulfillment. And the reason we come to the end of these 50 chapters, this whole book, and we see them being promised still, not saying, okay, you've had all these, but being promised still, is because the ultimate fulfillment is still to come. If that's all the fulfillment of God's promises, we would be left with a tiny, empty ice cream taster spoon, because this is the foretaste. Let's turn quickly to Hebrews chapter 11. Verses 8 to 10. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance, and he went out not knowing where he was going. By faith, he went to live in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to a city whose foundations and whose designer and builder is God. Abraham, who got these very promises we're reading in chapter 12 of Genesis, goes to the promised land and chooses not to build a city and dig in, but to live in tents, as if a foreigner in the promised land given to you, Abraham, by God himself directly, even as he stands before God and receives the promise of this land. Still he knows it is but a foretaste. We read on in verses 13 to 16. All these died in faith, not having received the things promised, but having seen them and greeted them from afar, and having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. For people who speak thus make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. If they'd been thinking about the land from which they'd gone out of, they would have had opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better country. That is a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city. All these died in faith, not having received these promises, but as ones having seen them from afar. Let's just grasp that for a second. We've just read about Joseph literally saving the lives of all the nations of the earth. They were all going to starve for 7 years. And he fed every single person across all the nations. Yet he did not receive the promise that they would be a blessing to all the nations of the earth. He did not receive that promise, but he died as one having seen it from afar. Because what he received was but a foretaste of the blessings to come. And that is what we hold on to. Now, funnily enough, here in these blessings, in what we're reading in chapter 49, we don't only see a reiteration of foretastes, we don't even see a confirmation of the promises to come, but God actually speaks through Jacob and tells us how he will ultimately fulfill these promises. Let us read again the blessings of Judah. Verse 8, Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down before you. Remember, in verse 28, this isn't just a blessing for him. This is a blessing for all of the tribes and all those who come from him. Not only will all the brothers praise Judah, but all the tribes of Israel will ultimately praise the tribe of Judah, and all the nations will praise it also. Why? Who's coming that all the tribes and all the nations will praise? Verse 9, Judah is like a lion's cub. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He stooped down. He crouched as a lion and as a lioness. Who dares rouse him? Who's the conquering lion to come, of which Judah is a foretaste? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him. To him shall be the obedience of the peoples. Not just a people, not just this people, the peoples, all the peoples of the earth will pay tribute to him and will give him obedience. Well, we certainly don't see this fully fulfilled here in Judah himself, who's still under the command of Joseph. We start to see this fulfilled as the tribes of Israel look to Judah for leadership. We see it fulfilled maybe a little more as King David comes, uniting the tribes of Israel. Some might mark him as the Lion of Judah, ruling with all coming to him in obedience, but not all come to him in obedience, not all give him tribute. And he dies. Again, even David is a foretaste of the Lion of Judah to come. Let's read Revelation chapter 5, verse 5 to 6. I'll read it out, you don't have to turn there. Please do if you want. Revelation chapter 5, verses 5 to 6. And let me just make a note here, for those of you who maybe haven't read the book of Revelation before. This is it's a genre that's it's called an apocalyptic genre, but it's basically a dream, a vision of what's to come in the future of the end times when Jesus returns and all of us are united in the new heavens and the new earth. And it says this in verse 5. And one of the elders said to me, weep no more. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has conquered, so that he can open up the scroll and its 7 seals. A little further down in verses 9 and 10, it says this about the Lion of Judah. Worthy are you to take the scroll and to open its seals, for you were slain, and by your blood you ransomed the people of God. From every tribe and language and people and nation, you have made a kingdom and priests to our God, and they shall reign on earth. Judah is the foretaste of the true Lion of Judah, who will come and will be slain, and by his blood we and all the people of God will be ransomed. Ransomed for the price against our sins, the debt we all have to pay, the debt of eternal death. The penalty of God's wrath and punishment against all the evil we have committed. The Lion of Judah will come to ransom us from that debt. The ultimate fulfillment of the Lion of Judah is Jesus. And in Jesus is the ultimate fulfillment of these promises. The last portion of Genesis is not an anticlimax. It's not just a little piece of narrative of burial and how that was carried out, some old Hebrew blessings. No, it is firmly about the entire theme of Genesis. It's confirming the promises of God, the one who fulfills his promises, and his promises are blessings. And it points us forwards to look to Jesus, in who we will find ultimate fulfillment of these promises. And what I really like about the note that Genesis leaves us on is, I mean, certainly for me, I can often think of Genesis as being a history book, which it is. This is fantastic and wonderful history. But sometimes we can just boil it down to that. It's just about looking back to history. It's just about origins, about where he came from, about how things started, which it is those things. But actually, I think Genesis leaves us not looking back, but looking forwards. First to Jesus, his death and his resurrection, but even more so to his return. Because if Genesis is about the God who fulfills his promises, and those promises are for the ultimate promised lands, whose foundations are laid for God, a heavenly home, eternal blessings, not just for the Jews, but all the nations, you and me, who join in with the blessings of Jesus Christ, pouring out his ransom for us also at the cross. Then it leaves us looking forwards to Jesus' second coming, for he will return. The Lion of Judah, who roared as he died on the cross, will return again on horse with swords and vanquish death and sin and his enemies for all time, throwing them into the lake of the fire. He has ransomed us, but drawing us together for all eternity in him, in the new heavens and the new earth, the true promised land. So as we return to our initial question, do you fear death? Do you fear that dark abyss? No, we don't fear death. We welcome it. We look forward to its glory. Because for us who know Jesus, we know that in death we have life and the promised land forevermore. And that's what Genesis is about. What confidence does this give us? Not just of where we came from, but of where we're going. Confidence that he will deliver on his promise of land and blessings and glory forevermore. So guys, I'll leave us with this. As a church, as we go through hard and difficult times in our personal lives, as a congregation, as a nation, as we face many challenges, let us grab a hold of Genesis and hold on to this as a solid rock rooted in Jesus Christ. And when people ask us, why don't we fear death? Let's take them to Genesis. When people ask us how we know God is good, let's take them to Genesis. When people ask us, how do we know that God will bless us? Why is it worth knowing him? We can take them to Genesis. Thank you, Father, for this encouragement. Thank you for your blessings. Thank you for your promises that we can hold on to them for now and forevermore. I pray that you will encourage us by this and let it be our battle cry as we go out on the streets of Preston and tell everyone we meet about you and who you are. In Jesus' name, amen.